5:30.
This is what I would have.
A motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Charlie, yeah.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, policy review 900 series.
Well, good evening. As we said last month, our reviews kind of keep getting shorter and shorter. I know we have a couple things that Adam's going to talk about here in a second as we look at some updates related to middle school changes. And then Director Lingo had a question about something we might consider on our facility use. And so we'll talk about that in the second item this evening. But as it relates to just updates to the 900s, we only had a couple very small changes. The first was in 903.1. We updated foundation to foundation for the Iowa City Community School District, so just a name change. The second one, and not substantial either, but more substantial than that, was in 903.4. This was just something that we looked to do to make the policy consistent with work we've done last year as related to the appeal process for concerns that came to the board or to administration. I don't think it was last fall, but the fall before that, we worked on the 100s to make that filing a complaint and the appeal process consistent. And maybe just because it's buried here at the end of the 900s, we didn't catch it. And so it talked about following the board's chain of command. Well, everything else talks about following the complaint process as laid out in the 100s. So just trying to make that consistent. So those are the only two kind of updates to the policies in the 900s. But entertain questions on these or what other ones that the board or other members of the team found as they went through the 900s this month, outside the fee schedule.
How do you determine fees in the past? Like how do you come up with those?
Sure. So do you want
If you have any idea, I'm just more curious.
Yeah, so really, that's been in concert with facilities management in my office, looking at what other districts are doing, what our costs are actually to provide access for facilities. We're not looking to make money off of that. If anything, we probably err a little bit on the opposite side of that equation. So, you know, we really just look though at what are our costs and then try to establish a reasonable reflection of what those costs are.
Thank you.
So we're on the second point here, policy updates. Is that right?
yeah, I think that's kind of the transition
Okay,
to those. Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment on noticing number 401.5.6, the wage scales, that the wage scales are, every position has a wage of $15 an hour more, which is one of our overall goals in the district.
And so thanks, Charlie, I appreciate that, because
Yeah.
that's work that we've really committed to, so thanks to Brady and Nick and to the board for that. I think I'm glad you pointed that out. We sometimes forget to celebrate some of those pieces. This second point, the policy updates, were to capture a couple of pieces that we'd missed about making sure that we had everything labeled as middle school rather than junior high, and just, again, trying to be consistent. I don't know, Nick and Brady spent a lot of time even doing that to the negotiated agreements where we have those. And so I think we'll continue to find those over the next several months. And so if you find one, just let us know and we'll do what we can to get that corrected.
Well, we had an email bringing our attention to the Little Theater at Northwest Junior High.
Yeah.
And that was the one that I was going to bring up as a suggestion to strike that line from the fee use schedule, which is the third line below the middle schools section for the Little Theater at Northwest.
Sounds good.
And so then we also, on the fee schedule, we got a question from Director Lingo over the weekend. Do you want to share it? Do you want me to share it?
I can.
Okay.
It's throughout the winter, I was contacted by a parent that was having trouble getting their combination of problems. First was just trying to access for their elementary schools, the high school building, and then just more neighborhood access for being able to use the gym to do club sport practice. And I believe I talked to Superintendent Degner, and before the pandemic, it sounded as though that elementary schools may have been available for rental. And yeah, to me, extracurricular activities, whether it's sports, academics, or the arts, it's very near and dear, and building those programs so we get the kids built into the system. And they come to us for high schools for their athletics and arts and whatever it may be. So I was just wondering what the likelihood of being able to open that back up to elementary students, or if that is anything on your radar, or.
Yeah, go ahead. So yeah, I agree. Extracurricular, co-curricular, community use, we want the buildings to be available, but we also want to make sure that we're able to maintain them safely and securely and keep them in tip-top shape. And that's been one of the challenges is, unlike at our secondary schools, we don't have custodial staff that's in the elementary schools on the weekends or in the evenings. And so that's been one of the driving factors about why we haven't done that. To the point, can we? Absolutely. With a couple of caveats.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't have spoken absolutes. Could we develop a system where that would be a possibility? Yes. We've talked about it this morning. There's a number of different things that we'd want to look at, but most basically, we would need to come up with a different fee schedule, probably paradigm that we have right now. Mainly that's because since there isn't constant custodial coverage, if you rented, let's say, the gym for 2 hours on a Saturday, that would probably be something where it would be a 4 or 5 hour rental. We need the custodian there beforehand to make sure that the space was set up to open the building. Then the custodian would have to stay to make sure that people only access the right part of the building during that time. And the big piece is, with our custodians not coming in until Monday morning at 6:15, they have to stay to make sure the facility's cleaned up, because we wouldn't have enough time before the day started. So it would look a little bit different probably for individuals, and I'm gonna pick on Eliza because she's sitting here and I know she'll be good about it. Eliza graciously, and Adam, but I'm only gonna pick on Eliza, graciously started a girls' basketball league on the east side for some of our younger students, but Eliza's very responsible. But we're not going to be able to make determinations between Eliza, who we think is really responsible, will pick up everything after her, and other folks that we might not know as well. And so there might be some pushback, because if all Eliza's doing is bringing her own balls and having us open up the gym, we're still going to have to charge her for hours after that's closed off. We wouldn't have ability to do it on a case by case. Along with that, and this is something that Jeff talks to us a lot about, is times have changed, and while 10 years ago we couldn't give overtime away fast enough, our staff just aren't interested in working extra hours. And so along with that, we would have to set up a system where if somebody made a request on the custodial side, someone would have to accept that assignment before we could actually grant somebody the ability to run the gym. Because the last thing we want to do is to run out of space, not have custodial staff to be able to be able to be there on site. And again, I think we can do it. I'm just trying to explain some of the things we want to talk through and that we would make work. And the third piece about, the last piece, and then Matt probably wants to jump in here too, is we would want to potentially, at least at the starting point, maybe designate a couple schools in each area of the district, rather than just opening up all of our elementary schools for use. For the reasons we just said, also buildings under construction, we could on the front end say where we didn't want families to be in. Some of our schools, the gyms are constructed where we could easily block off the rest of the building, and so we might want to use those schools as opposed to one where the gym is more centrally located and it allows for that free reign. Or we might know there's a problem in a school. And the other thing we know we do have is several of our schools have 2080 agreements with the cities for already using. We wouldn't want to open those up because the cities have those. And so these are some things you all know, but we've given it some thought. I think there is a path forward on it. It's just probably going to be a little more integral than this, but if there's a demand, we definitely want to help people get in and have those opportunities.
Yeah, I think you did a nice job of outlining, the things we've discussed previously, and then again today with it. There is a lot of pressure in the winter, really for gym space. I mean, it's when our secondaries are seeing a lot of pressure on that time, and then of course that's when we have younger kids trying to access things too. And so I do think there's a better way we can reach for a solution. I mean, we do want the community to see those as their spaces and that they can access them. Chase did a nice job of just highlighting, what our pressure points are, and just trying to find the staff, and then having them assist in paying for that staff over time, so that that we don't create a budget challenge because of it. But I think we have some things we can work on, and that we can try to actionalize, before we get too much further. If you guys are supportive of that or think that sounds reasonable.
I would be in favor of it,
I think it's very reasonable. I'm not expecting all 21 or 20 elementary schools next year to be open all winter long.
Sure.
But
And I'm not sure we'd even have a need for that, and so I think
Yeah.
if we, have a few options for people to go to, that'll work. I think our biggest hurdle will just be if we can find the staff to, accept those assignments and want to work that.
If you can find a good balance,
Mhm.
because it's really important for the community to get into the buildings and
Right.
take along, right?
And the space in the secondaries is just really, really limited.
Yeah.
yeah. And that's what I think the person was running into, was that they're trying to access City High, and
Yeah.
it's just,
Non-starter.
yeah.
But yeah, we're definitely happy to look at
Yeah.
it. And then I guess that means that we'll probably bring this back another time so we can,
Right.
so we can add that on. at some point.
Thank you for considering it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are we on to item 3 then?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'll just open this one. Last time we had talked to you a little bit about I'm gonna probably keep calling it Appendix 9 because this other name is so much longer, but capital projects planning and approval process for capital improvements requiring bid per the Iowa Code, as the policy is named. Maybe we should just call it 707 5G1, right?
Make a nice big acronym out of it.
Yeah, that's what we do. So we had talked to you about a total project cost that we'd bring back to you in terms of when you would want to see those items at step 2. We don't think some of those smaller projects, it probably makes sense to be bringing all of those, but ones that reach a threshold of a total project cost, it would make sense to kind of pull those out from the package and separate those out. And so Chase is going to talk to you about that, and then also kind of a reworked cover sheet that maybe better explains the total project budget, and then also what you would be actually approving that evening, because we've gotten some questions on that before when they see a project that says 15 million and they think you're approving 15 million meeting after meeting, and that's not really the case, right? You're just approving that piece of the project. And so those were a couple of the items that we were tasked to take and come back with, and I think we have a good suggestion for the total project cost and then the updated cover sheet.
And Jeff's here as well, and so don't be shy to ask Jeff some questions along the way. But we said, the recommendation is we set that minimum for the step 2 for it to be pulled out of Appendix 9 at $1.5 million as the team looked, that's right, 1.5, yeah.
Yep.
Looked back at FMP 2.0, that's where we kind of thought the majority of the projects were above that. Projects underneath that tend to lean towards things that are maintenance or annual upkeep and things that we invented Appendix 9 for in the first place. But those ones that you might hear about in the community most likely are going to be above that 1.5. And so that would be our recommendation. We don't have a policy amendment tonight, but that's what we wanted to put on the table for your consideration, is that we use that amount. I'm seeing some nods around the table.
Reasonable, sounds good.
Okay, and so we'll start to work on that.
In reading through this process, approving projects and the steps involved, I was drawn to step number 1, which is approving the facilities master plan. And thinking about that, to me, a project makes sense because if it improves our instructional capacity or meets an instructional need. I'm not quite so sure that the way we're approaching explaining projects and approving them keeps that in mind at every step of the way. We approve a project budget because That project will provide outdoor classroom space that students have asthma. It's just an example. So I'm not going to suggest an overhaul of word of how this is written right now, but at least I'm much more interested in how a particular building, a particular revision, remodeling enables us to do better instruction than I am, frankly, sorry for the words, about the cost of the project.
But
Generally
I guess
speaking.
where my head goes when you're kind of making that point, Charlie, I'd think about, some of those guiding concepts or guiding principles we had in asking the community to support the PEPL, and that, we had structured FMP around some of those guiding principles that we'd heard from feedback. And so it might be a matter of when we do bring that FMP back for, adoption again from the board, is that those are reiterated, right? That the reason we're doing these projects rests on those tenets, right? Those feedback pieces that we heard from the community. And so I think keeping that front of mind is probably important for people, because it does just become about the physical structure, and we might lose sight of the original reasons that, the community supported that 2 to 3 years ago that we told them at the time. And so I think that'd be a good step for us when we do come back to that FMP conversation here in June about, hey, what were those guiding principles for us at that time?
And what all these projects enable us to do that we can't.
Yeah, and how do they connect, right? Sure.
So the document I just passed around was part of our discussion when we were together last month. It's really that summary, that cover sheet that is the beginning of Appendix 9 on the consent agenda every month. And this is from what you have in front of you is a redraft of what we put in front of the board on May 14th. You're not going to be able to see it on my screen, but it's actually only about a paragraph long, if you can see it there. And really what is there for every project is, if you look at the first one, the name of it, Center for Innovation, formerly Tyler Building, then that subline, 2024 Building Renovation Phase 2, and the only other thing on the current cover letter is in that very last line, steps 3 and 4. And so what we kind of took back from the board was, with all the documentation, if there was a way that we could better describe each project in the cover sheet, and then provide, as Matt kind of just talked about, what specifically we're asking for the board to vote on that night. That might help clarify and what's on the agenda, any fiscal impact for that evening, and then also kind of keep in mind the overall scope of the project. And Jeff and Michelle and team did a nice job of adding these lines where we provide that project, the overall project description, what that budget is, then the recommendation, and then that specific budget impact for that step that's being approved that night. So, right, if you take what we're looking at on the Center for Innovation, the overall budget for the project is $15 million, but on the 14th, we were just asking you to approve the schematic design and design development drawings, which had no cost on it at all. And so it teases out that idea, because I get when you go through those documents, it can be confusing because you see all these different numbers. So the board doesn't know maybe exactly what we're asking. The community definitely doesn't know unless they read all 95 pages that are there sometimes about what is actually being put in front of the board. So we feel like this draws that out to the forefront, and then again, you'll get to see those descriptions over and over again as the project goes through the different steps of Appendix 9. So we would, and remember, this is what would be part of Appendix 9, separate from what Matt was talking about, those projects over $1.5 million at Step 2, we would automatically pull out of Appendix 9 and have as an agenda item so we could discuss it with the board.
One addition, I mean, this is great, first of all, but the one addition that I would ask is, and I'm going to show my own ignorance 6 months into this process, I did not have a clue of what the steps meant up until the last meeting. And that's my own ignorance, for not asking questions. But, where we have these steps, like steps 3 and 4, like going from here to here to see what 3 and 4 mean. So maybe if in parentheses, or in some sort of annotation, after the number 3, just put down project schematic design update. And then 4.
Right.
I know it's redundant, but it's also like.
No, it makes sense, and when we were talking, I caught that, is that with that recommended approval amount between the recommendation and the steps, I think it breaks that up, because Mitch, what you're
Yeah.
asking about, right, the recommendation does say what we're actually asking, it's the name of the steps, but we've just stuck that
Okay.
number, and so I think if we change that order a little bit, it would probably do exactly what you're asking, because we did talk about it too, I
So
agree.
I remember when the modulars for Southeast Junior High first popped up, we had at least one member of the community reach out like, are you building these now? And,
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
And then,
so I
I think that makes it clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we can definitely do that.
Do we want to put a link to the policy somewhere in appendix 9 so that it's handy, or is that not necessary?
I think that goes back to what you're kidding about at the beginning of, do we change appendix 9 to actually be, to tie in with the name of the policy?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we could, I don't know, can you hyperlink? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yep.
just a
Attachments.
cover doc, right? So
Yeah,
we could
so
put
we
the,
just hyperlink
we just
in there.
hyperlink one of
Right
these
to it.
underlined, like where it says
Yep.
appendix 9 approval, we could just hyperlink that and people could lift off.
And maybe add the policy number in parentheses after it, so that way it's
Yeah.
clear.
And where you have the budget, I wonder if it would be more clear to say total project budget. Because again, I had
said that
community
today.
members coming
I
at me
heard that
with
somewhere.
thinking, like tripling this $15 million figure, thinking it's 45 million, and just to be.
I'm just laughing because that's what we had talked about earlier today, was putting
Yeah.
total project budget there, so,
Oh,
yep,
okay.
yep. I think that's good.
Yeah. And I mean, I like the 1.5, but I mean, even 2 million is, I would be comfortable with that, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, Jeff, you probably know, is there any sort of natural cutoff? There's probably not.
No, just most of the PEPAL projects we have are less than 1.5,
Yeah.
and that's why. You know, but if you want 2 million, we can make anything you want.
Well, if
I
that's
don't want it to be burdensome, but I also, I want
Yeah.
a balance where it's not so burdensome on the staff, but also where where the public can easily see the important projects.
And like I
right?
said, most of the smaller projects were about, they were about 1.2, so as we move forward, though, they'll be closer to 1.5 and 2 million, but we have, those jobs are done now. You won't be seeing the small ones coming up at all.
We could also start with 2, and if we feel like we missed something at that point, then, we can also revisit the number easy enough, so.
Well, and it's also, we can understand it's just a guide. If there's a project that catches a board member's eye that's underneath 2 million.
Right, we still want you to pull
talk
it.
about-
Yep.
Pull it, and we're happy to
Yep.
talk about it. I mean, we're proud of the work that we're doing to support the instruction, like Charlie led with, so anytime we get to champion that, we want to. We just don't want to spend, considerable amounts of time going through all the projects if we don't need to at board meetings. So we can use that as a guide, but yeah, please don't hesitate to say, hey, we'd love for you to expand on this project, and we would happily do so.
I would say these are bids required for Iowa code, that's BRIC, that's brick. You want to shorten things up, to make it easier to say.
The brick approval process. All right, yeah, I could probably get on board with that, JP.
Just saying.
I like a good acronym.
That didn't take long, did it?
This is your the bat, you're in and out of the park, JP. Miss you.
Director Finch, that's all we have on that item, but entertain any more questions or suggestions anybody has?
No, this is super helpful.
I guess I would add one thing, and it's because of something that we're hoping happens this evening. Well, we're going to talk about the second phase for the CFI, but at step 2, when we bring the designs back, just a reminder that when we're talking safety and security, we don't put our blueprints up on the website. So just like tonight, a lot of the presentations might not actually be loaded into Word docs. They might be things that we just display and walk you through, and it's from a safety and security standpoint, it's protected under Iowa law. So sometimes you might not see an attachment, even though we're gonna pull it out and talk about it, and that's why, it's because we're gonna show you a blueprint of something that we just don't want out there.
And it's, yeah, the community member wants to see it, they can attend the meeting.
Yeah. And they can come in, or they can come in, set up time and look at it, we just don't let them take pictures or anything like that.
We
Oh,
allow
wait,
people
can't-
to
no,
come
they
in.
can't.
You know, we have all the prints, and so we show them, you just can't take
Yeah, we
pictures
talked
or
about that
copies.
today, I don't think it'll get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Are we meeting in the summer?
Typically, we haven't done committee meetings in the summer. I think one question I have for you guys with agenda setting later in the other meeting is kind of this conversation around FNP 2.0. If you're going to want to do that in a committee meeting rather than at the board table, we could entertain doing a committee meeting for that in June, but I don't think there's a need to do P&G in the summer. That other issue is kind of just where you want to have the conversation. We could even call that a work session and kind of pause the committee work over the summer, and then anything we see that comes up like that, we could also call a work session. So in answer to that question, I don't think so.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.